The smell of my old flannel shirt still carries cedar. I've worn that thing every Thanksgiving for 20 years, and my daughter used to tease me about it every single time. "Dad, you look like you raided a thrift shop," she'd say, laughing in that easy way she had when she was still mine to know. I'd laugh too. I thought that was just how we were. I thought that was permanent. I'm 63 years old. I retired last spring from 31 years at the municipality, roads and infrastructure. Nothing glamorous, but steady, honest work. My wife passed 11 years ago from ovarian cancer, and after that it was just me and my daughter. Just the two of us in that brick semi-detached in Hamilton, Ontario, the one with the cracked front step I kept meaning to fix and never did. I fixed everything else, though. Fixed the leaky eaves, the drafty basement windows, the furnace twice. Raised her on a city pension and whatever overtime I could find. Sent her to Mohawk for 2 years, then helped her transfer to McMaster. Paid her tuition, her textbooks, her rent when she moved in with her boyfriend, later her husband. I did all of it without complaint because she was all I had left of the life I used to have, and I loved her without condition. I want you to understand that before I tell you the rest. My son-in-law's name is Crispin. His parents, his father in particular, are the kind of people who mention their cottage on Georgian Bay within 5 minutes of meeting you. His father retired early from a Bay Street firm, and his mother volunteers on 3 different boards and corrects people's grammar at dinner parties. They're not bad people, exactly. They're just the kind of people who make you feel the square footage of your house the moment you walk into theirs. My daughter started dating Crispin about 6 years ago. I liked him well enough at first. Quiet, polite, always shook my hand firmly. But I noticed early on that when they came for visits, she'd spend the whole drive back critiquing my kitchen. "Dad, you really should update those cabinets. Or my neighborhood. I just worry about resale value." Small things. I told myself it was just growing up. Couples absorb each other's families. It's natural. They got married 3 years ago at a vineyard in Niagara-on-the-Lake. Beautiful venue. I paid for 40% of the wedding, $22,000, because Crispin's parents offered to split it, and we didn't want my daughter to carry debt. I gave that money gladly. I danced badly at the reception and cried during the father-daughter dance and felt genuinely like the luckiest man in the room. After they married, my daughter and I still talked often. She'd call on Sunday afternoons, sometimes for an hour. We had a rhythm. But slowly, gradually, the calls got shorter and the gaps got wider. By last year, they were maybe every second Sunday, 20 minutes, mostly her telling me about renovations they were doing to their place in Oakville or Crispin's promotion at the tech company he worked for. I'd listen. I'd ask questions. I'd say I was proud of her. I meant it. I also still helped, financially. Not dramatically, I'm not a wealthy man, but my pension is decent, and I've always been careful with money, so when things came up, I helped. I co-signed their HELOC when they first bought the house, because Crispin's credit history was thin. I transferred money when they needed a new roof, $8,000, which I said was a gift, not a loan, because I didn't want the awkwardness. When my daughter mentioned they were short 1 month because of a big dental bill, I e-transferred without being asked twice. I want to be honest. I didn't do these things resentfully. I did them because I wanted to, because helping your child feels good, and I had the means, and I genuinely believed, that the kind of relationship I had with my daughter was worth more than any amount of money. That brings me to last Christmas. In November, my daughter called and mentioned that Crispin's father was turning 65 in December. A milestone. His parents were planning a small gathering at their place, just family, close friends, and she wanted to do something special for him. She asked if I thought a luxury watch was too extravagant. I said it depended on the watch. She said she was looking at something from a jeweler on Bloor Street in Toronto, a Swiss mechanical piece, and that the price was around $300. I thought that sounded generous but reasonable for a milestone birthday. I said, "Sure, that sounds lovely. He'll appreciate it." That was in November. I didn't think about it again. In January, I was reviewing my banking app. I check it every few weeks. Nothing obsessive, just habit from years of careful budgeting. And I noticed a transaction I didn't recognize. It was from early December, a jewelry store on Bloor Street. $9,420. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. I went through it methodically, the way you do when you're hoping you've made a mistake. I checked the date. I checked the merchant name. I checked my account history for any transfer that might explain it. A payment I'd forgotten about, a joint purchase. There was nothing. The money had come out of my checking account. The account my daughter had been linked to since university, when I added her so she could access emergency funds if she ever needed them while living away from home. I'd never removed her because it never occurred to me that I'd need to. She had used my account to buy a watch, not a $300 watch, a $9,000 watch, for her father-in-law's birthday party. She had not asked me. She had not mentioned it. She had not said a word. I poured myself a coffee and stood at the kitchen window, looking out at the backyard, at the bird feeder my wife had put up years ago that I'd repainted twice since. I stood there for a long time. I wasn't angry yet. I was something quieter than angry. I was trying to locate myself inside the situation, trying to find the piece I must have missed, the conversation I'd forgotten about, the detail that would make this make sense. There was none. My daughter had made a unilateral decision to spend nearly $10,000 of my money on a gift for a man who owns a cottage on Georgian Bay, drives a current year BMW, and has never once, not once, called me by my first name. He calls me her father. In 6 years, that's what he calls me. I want to tell you what I got for Christmas that year. My daughter and Crispin came on the 27th. They spent Christmas Day and Boxing Day with his family, a tradition that had apparently solidified without discussion. She handed me a gift bag from the doorway, already in her coat, Crispin waiting in the running car at the end of the driveway. Inside the bag was a box of maple shortbread cookies from a grocery store chain and a card signed by both of them. The card said, "Merry Christmas, Dad. Hope you have a relaxing holiday." 11 words. She was back at the car in 4 minutes. I put the cookies on the counter and stood in my front hallway for a while. I didn't call her right away. I needed a week. I'm not a confrontational person by nature. I was raised by a father who believed that composure was a form of dignity, and I knew that if I called her while the thing was still raw, I would say it wrong. I'd either say too little and let her brush it off, or I'd say too much and make it about my feelings instead of what she'd actually done. I spent that week thinking very carefully. I also called my bank and spoke to someone about removing my daughter's access to the account. I did it that same day. I then transferred the remaining balance to a new account she had no connection to, and I canceled the supplementary e-transfer authorization I'd set up years ago. It took about 40 minutes total. The woman at the bank was very kind and didn't ask questions. Then I called my daughter. She answered on the second ring, cheerful, normal, asking if I'd watched the Leafs game the night before. I said I hadn't. I said I'd been going through my bank statements and I'd found something I needed to ask her about. I gave her the date and the amount and the merchant name. There was a pause. It wasn't a short pause. "Dad," she said finally. "I was going to talk to you about that." I asked her when. Another pause. She said she'd meant to mention it before, but things had gotten busy with the holidays, and she'd planned to pay it back. And she knew it was a lot, but she hadn't wanted Crispin's dad to be disappointed, because the watch he'd wanted had gone up in price, and she'd already told Crispin it was happening, and she didn't want to look bad in front of his family, and I let her talk. I didn't interrupt. I find that when someone is explaining something like this, the best thing you can do is stay quiet and let them finish, because they will eventually run out of ways to avoid the center of it. When she stopped, I said, "You took nearly $10,000 from my account without asking me." She said she knew that, and she was sorry, and she was going to transfer it back as soon as their RRSP contribution cleared. I said that wasn't really the point. She went quiet again. I said I'd already removed her access to my account, and I wasn't going to restore it. I said I wanted her to know that I wasn't angry in the way she might expect. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't issuing ultimatums, but that something had shifted for me and I needed her to understand that. I told her the amount she'd spent on her father-in-law's birthday gift was more than I'd spent on her university tuition each year. I told her I'd received grocery store cookies for Christmas. I didn't say it accusingly. I just said it plainly because it was true and it seemed like something she should hear out loud. She started crying. I'm her father. Hearing her cry does something to me that I cannot fully harden against, and I want to be honest about that. Part of me wanted to fold. Part of me wanted to say, "It's okay, let's figure it out, I love you." But I'd said it's okay too many times when things were not okay, and I think, in retrospect, that is part of how we got here. I told her I loved her. I told her I needed some time. I said I'd be in touch. She called back 3 times that evening. I let it go to voicemail. She called twice the next morning. On the 3rd call, I picked up and told her calmly that I needed a few weeks of space, and I'd reach out when I was ready. She said she was scared I was going to cut her off. I said I wasn't going to cut her off. I said I was 63 years old, and I had given her everything I had for 30 years, and I needed 2 weeks to think, and surely she could give me that. She said, "Okay." She also, and this part I want to tell you, because I think it matters, transferred the $9,420 back to me within 72 hours. No partial payment, no installment plan. The full amount. I noticed that. I spent those 2 weeks doing what I always do when I need to think clearly. I went for long walks. Hamilton has a waterfall trail that most people don't know about. Tiffany Falls, Albion Falls, the little unnamed ones off the escarpment edge, and I walked them all over those 2 weeks. I wore my old hiking boots that needed resoling and didn't bother getting them fixed. I walked and I thought, and I let the cold air do what cold air does. What I came to was this. My daughter was not a bad person. She was a person who had spent years in a marriage where a certain standard of presentation mattered enormously, and she had slowly, without fully realizing it, absorbed that standard and applied it outward, to her father-in-law's birthday, to her image inside her husband's family, while letting the standard she held for our relationship quietly erode. She had not taken my money out of malice. She had taken it out of thoughtlessness. And in some ways, thoughtlessness is worse than malice, because you cannot argue with it. Malice knows what it's doing. Thoughtlessness doesn't even notice you. I also thought about my own role in it. I had made it very easy to take me for granted. I'd always been available, always been accommodating, always said, "Don't worry about it," when I should have said, "Actually, I'd like to talk about this." I had confused generosity with invisibility. I'd made myself so reliably present and so reliably unbothered that I had become, not in her heart maybe, but in the logistics of her life, background. I didn't want to be background anymore. When I called her back after 2 weeks, I told her all of that. Not harshly, not as an indictment, just honestly. The way you talk to someone you've known for 30 years and plan to know for 30 more. I told her I wanted us to be better than what we'd become. I told her I wanted to be called on days that weren't the Sundays she'd scheduled for it. I told her I wanted her to come by sometimes without Crispin, just the two of us, the way we used to. I told her I wanted her to understand that my money had limits, and that my willingness to help was not the same as an open account, and that the difference mattered. She listened to all of it without interrupting. Then she said, "I think I've been embarrassed of you." I didn't expect that. I waited. She said she didn't mean it the way it sounded. She said she'd spent so much time in Crispin's family, in their world, that she'd started seeing everything through their eyes, including me, my neighborhood, my kitchen, my flannel shirt. She said she'd been trying to compensate for things that didn't need compensating for, and that the watch was part of that. And she knew it was wrong, and she was ashamed of it. That took courage, I think, saying that. I told her so. We talked for almost 2 hours that afternoon, the longest we'd talked in years. She cried twice more, and I came close once, though I didn't entirely get there. By the end of it, we hadn't resolved everything. There's no conversation that does that, but something had reopened between us that I hadn't realized was closed. Things are different now. Not perfect. Different. She comes by every second Sunday, but she calls on Thursdays too. Small calls, 10 minutes, just to check in. She came over last month and we walked the waterfall trail together, just the two of us, and she held my arm on the icy parts. Crispin's father turned 65 in December and wore his new watch to a family dinner I was not invited to, and I genuinely don't think about it very much anymore. I still have the grocery store cookies, actually. The tin, anyway. I use it to hold screws and hardware bits in the garage. I don't know why I kept it. Maybe because it's a useful size. Maybe because I'm a 63-year-old man who lives alone in Hamilton and holds on to things that have some utility left in them, even if they arrived under difficult circumstances. I resoled the hiking boots last week. They've got another few winters in them. So do I.